Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore. Boggy Talk is recorded on Boggy Bayou in Niceville, Florida, and is hosted by Justin Wyatt and James Ross, pastors at Church on Bayshore. We typically want every matter of faith and life to have crystal clear answers, but it isn't always that easy. This podcast digs in to help Christians think with a kingdom mentality about topics that sometimes get muddy and bog us down. So let's dive in.
Hey, and welcome to Boggy Talk. Thanks for joining us for week 4 of Diving Deeper, as we're diving in deeper to text from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12. But before we dive in deep today, diving in deep to this, hello, what's up, boy? How you doing, James Ross?
Wondering how you were going to transition that, so I started snickering already.
I just never know. Sometimes I don't even know what's going to happen until it's already out of my mouth.
I'm just surprised you haven't said, I'm diving in, I'm diving.
Oh, man,
you know what I'm talking about?
Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Yes, man.
Yeah.
You know every song.
Especially if it's a Christian song from the late 90s, early 2000s. So.
Did you drive around listening to Wow, That's What I Call Worship?
Absolutely, I did. I went into this phase where it was literally like, do you love Jesus if you don't listen to Christian
Did you
music?
love the Newsboys?
No,
really
I never actually liked them. No, they always annoyed me.
Why'd they annoy you?
Because I just felt like
you don't like bald people?
I just felt like they were gimmicky.
Oh, okay.
What really got me for them, like...
Wait. You had a problem with one Christian artist because you thought they were gimmicky.
A lot of them were gimmicky. Oh, my chair just fell.
Your chair's gimmicky.
I never liked them. I don't really know why. I probably still bought their CD because you had to if you're a Christian, right?
Okay.
The whole Breakfast in Hell song, like that one was just like, really? That's a song?
If I can't swim after 40
that's Jars
was
of
that
Clay.
Your favorite song? Oh, that's Jars of Clay.
So,
okay.
yeah, they were a little more respectable music-wise. So
what about, so DC Talk. I loved DC Talk in the 90s, late 90s.
Good. Man, some of the Reliant K, they're probably one of the best bands. They're probably a lot more underrated, under the radar, but they're so good.
They also started crossing mainstream, and so drummer wasn't wearing clothes when he was playing drums.
Yeah, but that was always the big deal, in the late 90s, early, well, I guess, 2000s too.
Why do we have to be Christian artists? Why can't we just be artists who are Christians?
And let's have a crossover album. We're just trying to No, you're trying to get rich. Let's just be honest. You're trying to make Switchfoot, you're good and you want to make more money. So go do that. But don't be that's so funny. We just want to be artists who are Christians. And that you can be, but you chose this route first because you thought it was the easier way to make money. But now we've really dived in deep to a topic we weren't planning on talking.
Christians sure have been the pedestal for many aspiring artists, haven't
basically, they're like, oh,
did you?
Remember, you know who started as a Christian artist? Jessica Simpson.
Yeah, she did.
Didn't go very far, so she decided going after Britney Spears, that would be the...
Wasn't Katy Perry?
Katy Perry was a Christian artist. Yeah, it's all marketing.
Beyonce?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
She sang in church. That doesn't necessarily... She was an artist who was a Christian.
But she could sing. Gosh, she could sing.
You didn't watch this, but there was an episode of South Park.
I did not watch that.
And Cartman, I don't think of many of our people. This is not an
endorsement of South Park.
No, it's not. But he decides he's going to be a famous Christian artist, so he just changes.
He gets some highlighted frosted tips.
He changes songs. That's a good one. He changes songs about a girl and just replaces the word girl with God. And becomes a famous Christian artist.
That was about all it took.
That is an episode of South Park. So,
funny. Well, speaking of South Park, just kidding.
What?
Hey, it's May.
Speaking of this conversation 24th. Going south,
it is the last week of school, and I'm simultaneously so excited that it's coming to an end, and also it's also summer. But mainly because by this time in May, exams, and we're just get your stuff done, kids. You better pass. You better not just pass. You better have good grades.
This is our first year with middle schoolers. They need a break.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I'm excited for this summer just because there's great things coming up this summer. There's camps, there's kids camp, there's student camp. We're taking students to Dominican Republic mission trip.
This Sunday.
This coming Sunday is Student Sunday.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. So Alec Ammons, our student minister, is going to be preaching. And we have student baptism, which is awesome.
Yes.
And also our student worship team, our high schoolers, middle schoolers, going to be leading us in worship in all 3 services. So that is super exciting.
Lord willing.
Yes, Lord willing. That something could tag.
That's a lot of moving pieces. So.
It's going to be a great. It's going to be a great day. So you should be here Sunday if you can. So you should. So as we
last week we talked about Mark. Your transitions are much better than mine.
Mark chapter 12 is where we are. We're talking about just a few verses here. Mark chapter 12, 3 verses. I had to count 35, 36, 37.
Good job.
There you go.
End of the school year.
Now here we go. I'm going to read the text and then we're going to dive in deep. And as Jesus taught in the temple, he said, "How can the scribes say that the Christ is the son of David? David himself in the Holy Spirit declared, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet.' David himself calls him Lord. So how is he his son?" And a great throng heard him gladly. So if you are familiar with the Gospels, you maybe know this. If you're not familiar with the Gospels, one thing you need to know is reading the Gospel of Mark is like reading the Cliff Notes versions of everything that's going on. You often find more going on in the same accounts. Mark's just like to the point, like here's what happened, moving on. And immediately this happened. The word immediately is in Mark a lot. So as we look at this passage, let's talk about what is going on, because these 3 verses are sandwiched between the Great Commandment, and then next he's going to give basically the bewaring to the scribes, and the widow's offering the story. So what is happening in this text?
Well, if Mark's a Cliff Notes, why is the preacher taking so long to go through that book?
Why did he still preach 40 minutes?
Yeah. Why we been in there a year and a half? I don't know who asked me that question like that, but
who talks like that, boy?
Yeah, I mean, really, ultimately here, Jesus is just trying to show fault in their understanding of who the Messiah is going to be, because they're thinking about him in terms of how great David was, and being, David's son, and kind of bringing us back to where David had us. And yet he's the Messiah, he's the anointed one, and David calls him Lord. So clearly Jesus is saying there's this superiority of him. So how does your understanding of him make sense given David, who you look to's understanding makes sense? And there's a lot of places you go from there, but I think ultimately, part of the point that we wanted to dive in a little deeper today was that, they would reject Jesus because of their view of the Messiah. And, that is, that's really an important piece here. As believers, we don't believe that there is Old Testament Judaism and then Christianity, and those are 2 different things. We believe that Old Testament Judaism is Christianity, that we are practicing what was practiced in the Old Testament, just the fulfillment of it. Yeah. So we think that Jews, this crowd and others, reject Jesus because of their view of the Messiah.
And so their view of the Messiah was this, that they really did expect him to be this conquering king like David, who was victorious. And I think, you look in this passage, Jesus is getting to the heart of that. He's saying, even David says, Lord said to my Lord, like he's pointing out to them that even David says this. He's not just saying, how the son of David, but David himself is saying Lord to him. Right. So it basically is getting at the point that you've missed the point, that you are looking for this victorious, conquering king who's going to fix your problems. He's going to put things right by you. Not necessarily by everybody else, but by you, and fulfill your desire of having a king.
Yeah. So I would say that there were really 3 things, if I were going to summarize what they were looking for: nationalistic, economy, or
economics, economic reasons.
Yeah. So maybe 3 reasons they were looking for: a national king, an economic king, and then their Well, really, that's it. I'm going to simplify that because I got off track there. But yeah, two things. So they're looking for somebody who's going to give them national independence and prominence, and also bring them, therefore to at least the religious elite to secured economic status. I would say, and the third I was going to say was, basically, a elevation of self in terms of personal status. Yeah.
And as you share that, I think as New Testament believers, on this side, we read back and we think sometimes, how could they have missed it?
Right.
How could they have missed that Jesus fulfilled all these prophecies? Because many of them knew the prophecies, and then they just didn't see it. There's the scribes that he's talking to that, they knew the prophecies and still were blinded to the fact that Jesus was the fulfillment. And it's so easy for us on this side to be like, how did they not? And we think that with the disciples. How did they miss it? How did they miss it up so much? And I'm like, well, we do the same thing. But as you're sharing about ultimately why they rejected Jesus, you talked about the political and you talked about really the economic. Don't you think we kind of do the same thing now?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So let's be generous to them for a moment and recognize that it was the job of the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Herodians, to some sense, based on the people they were, appointed to lead, and the affirmation of people, to say, hey, anyone who claims to be a prophet or a scribe, we're going to test if what they're saying is true, and to be hypercritical. So I think the error we make here is, oh my gosh, they just have such a critical spirit. Again, I don't know where these voices are coming from. And I think part of that is our just give everybody grace, give everybody. Well, we mean cheap grace often. So it's okay to question. The problem here is it was impossible for Jesus to pass their test because they weren't really looking to what the scriptures had to say.
Yeah, because what you're saying is like the test was rigged, basically.
Right,
they're creating ultimate, which if you go back in Mark, like where we've been in chapter 12, each of these passages we've talked about in the previous 3 weeks, it's a scenario where they're really trying to trick Jesus. They're trying to get him to pass a test that they are, and because Jesus is Jesus, and he's smart, he flips it on them each time, and you are quite wrong, and they're not asking any more questions after the third one that's recorded, because I think they saw they were getting nowhere because they're trying to basically trap him, and they've set this standard up that no one can fulfill what they think the Messiah would be.
Yeah. So how do you know the word so well and miss the Messiah of the one it all points to? And it comes back to, again, their filter was the belief about Israel nationally and economically, and this group's particular belief about what that would mean for their status. What Jesus was saying did not give them what they were looking for nationally. What Jesus was saying and what he was modeling in many ways did not give them what they were looking for economically. And therefore, what Jesus was saying would mean they would have to renounce the status they had earned based on their understanding, because they would admit we were wrong.
And we do not like to admit we're wrong. That is the same today as the same was then. Yeah.
It would be like if we realized we were wrong about the Bible, and therefore, hey, I've led you guys astray. I shouldn't have my job. This is the truth.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty severe, I don't know what the right word is, not response, right? But it's like the weight of that. And so basically they just decided, let's keep it going. Let's just keep it going. Reject it. It's easier. It's easier to keep our system going. It's easier to keep ourselves in this position than to actually recognize the truth and acknowledge the truth. And as you were talking about that, I think, goodness.
Yeah, right.
The same issue exists today, right?
Yeah.
As we're confronted with, if we read the Bible, we're confronted all the time with ways that we are wrong, that we've missed the mark. But it can feel easier just to keep the system going. And I think, as we talk about Israel, and we look at modern day the United States, it's like in this nationalism that, we've had done Boggy Talks before where like it patriotism and being patriotic, how that's a great thing, but it's not an elevation above the kingdom. But really how a lot of people look to Jesus to establish power and to bring financial, freedom, whatever, the financial success, and to help us thrive. And then ultimately, isn't that like typically how people vote too? Like they're looking for the president that's going to put their belief system, their party, their people in power and benefit them the most.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a problem because the president isn't in the Bible.
What?
So I do think sometimes we over spiritualize that issue, or that person. But we also vote. So we should vote not just so Trump, kingdom. Sorry, not Donald Trump. Kingdom trumps the all things we look at. It's the filter through which we look at everything, the kingdom of God that is, and his kingdom is not of this world. But then he says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So, okay, how do I live that out? And then if I'm being asked for my opinion, who do I think is going to bring that about the most? But then there's all these like the nuances to that economically that aren't dictated to us in the Bible. And so it is a matter of conscience and getting our conscience informed. And honestly, most of us just don't even know enough. And then we try to spiritualize that part, like, economics. And we shouldn't be spiritualizing that part. We should just say, this is what makes economical sense. Yeah. This guy doesn't say anything that's clearly against the Bible, or these two people both say something that's against the Bible. So this what makes sense, So again, I've talked before about my frustration with the passion people had for Trump. But if somebody said, hey, basically it's all, and I think he's going to do this economically, like I get why you arrive at that conclusion. But if you were like, this is God's chosen man, it's like, where is that in the Bible?
Right.
Like,
well, I think it's hitting on a point that like we look to leaders. Like, I agree what you're saying about like what would bring about these things, like not over spiritualizing it basically. I think of like, it's basically an American, or I shouldn't say American, a Western privilege that we have. And I think about like our pastors in India, and when they vote for a prime minister, like
their vote may or may not count.
I know, like, I mean, honestly, I think like, so historically right now, the prime minister of India is basically a Hindu nationalist. He wants, and his people, the people that he's putting in power want it to be a Hindu nation. And so under his leadership, there is increased persecution of Christians and Muslims.
Yeah.
And so when they vote, they're not voting for the person who's going to bring about the Christian nation, who's going to embody these, make India a Christian. They're saying they're voting for who's going to bring, freedom,
so where this ties to our text here is that Jesus is saying what the Messiah is so much greater than that.
Yes, like it's greater than this earthly kingdom.
So why are you so obsessed with your nationalistic view and nationalistic desires that you would then miss what God has for you?
Mm-hmm. To make that leader our Jesus, basically. It's like we put that leader in the place of Jesus,
right? And
then we miss Jesus.
And so no one is out there saying, I think Donald Trump or Joe Biden or who's our governor that DeSantis, or whoever else is going to run possibly. No one's saying, oh, well, I think they're Jesus. They're my Jesus. But people are basing their hope and their worth and their identity on what comes about because of the nation's future. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And it's like if our person doesn't win, then we're like, oh, we're doomed. And it's like both sides will say this kind of like thing, like, well, we're doomed now. We're just going to hell in a handbasket.
So Israel was saying if this Messiah is going to bring us back to that place.
Yes, exactly.
And you're not him.
And you're not it, Jesus, even though, you fulfill these things and, you're doing all these things, but you're not our version of what we wanted you to be and who we expect you to be. And you're not doing the things we thought you would do. So therefore you cannot be.
And listen, they were promising the people, hey, the Messiah's coming and he's going to give you that.
Yeah.
And then in order to say, the Messiah isn't that, they would have to admit that they had led people astray. Because they were deceived and confused.
And nobody wants to admit they're wrong.
And dude, they're going to be the dude on the side of the street. He's like, he used to be rich and wealthy religious leader, and now he's not.
Look at him now.
He's over there following that Christ. And then what happened to those people who were following that Christ? But there were people who did see him as that. You know, Paul. I mean, that's Paul's story.
Right.
So, we can't tell this story, and we didn't get to this Sunday without realizing that here is this one who was leading in the charge against the spread of this Jesus Christ as the Messiah, Jesus as the Christ. And yet God shows up and changes his heart.
Yeah.
And he does not live for that anymore.
Yeah. And I think the bottom line of this is like, we can so easily be like this and miss Jesus because he's not meeting our expectations.
Yeah.
So not just politically, but like Jesus, I thought when I came to Jesus, I thought Jesus was going to fix this problem, or he was going to change this person, or that life would get better or easier, or no, he's promised that he saves us from our sin and that he's with us.
Right.
Like and we have eternity with him.
Yeah.
He doesn't promise that every problem's fixed. He promised that he's with us.
Yeah.
And I think we have versions of and expectations of Jesus that don't match who he claims to be and who he is as the Messiah.
Which are tied to an earthly kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, for simplification.
Make my life better, make my life easier, fix my problems and fix me, and let's go.
So we've talked some about how society has moved from a collectivist view to individualistic view. So what I mean by that is probably up until about 100 years ago, kind of ending with after the World War II. It was probably waning, and then World War II brought a surge of it back, and then it went away. That people thought of their life more in terms of how is society doing? And if society is doing well, I attach my wealth, how I'm doing to that. And so when you think of Israel, the majority of the Israelites were thinking, if Israel is well, we're not like that anymore. We're individualist. So what I would say is we might have a hard time understanding how Israel would say if he can't bring about the strength of Israel and the kingdom, then they don't reject him. But what I would say is you are now an individual sitting on your own little throne, and we, I should say, are sitting on our own little thrones, and a lot of us won't accept a Jesus that doesn't exalt that king.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying with it. It's like, it just makes sense. It's like, I want to be the boss and I want to call the shots and I want everyone around me to bow and bend to my expectations and what I think they should do, my own kingdom. And that is not the kingdom that Jesus came to bring, not the kingdom of me, not the kingdom of you, not the kingdom of us, but the kingdom of God.
Right.
And I just don't want to miss that. And so I think as we're reading, I've loved going through the book of Mark on Sunday mornings, and we're hitting it again in life group, and as we're doing through the church-wide reading plan right now. I just keep, as we read it, like, Lord, just let me get to know you more again, because I don't want to miss you. I don't want to miss even like my own like ideas of what Scripture teaches or what the Bible, like, I don't want to miss, like, let me read it again like I haven't read it and just get to know you again.
That's good.
So,
well, I have an idea.
Okay.
A completely original idea. Since Alec is teaching this Sunday, why don't we take this into two parts? Part two. And we'll talk next week about eschatology.
Can you spell that?
Can you spell eschatology? And a little bit about kind of the things we're talking about right now, how people still think about Israel in these regards. And you've probably heard things like that, like Israel's got to be rebuilt, the temple's got to be rebuilt, send money to them.
Yeah. So eschatology, the study end times, and we're going to talk about that next week and how Israel fits into that. It should be fairly interesting because, eschatology is a fun word to throw around and pretend like you know more than you do.
And Justin is going to reference Left Behind at least 13 times.
I'm going to reenact scenes from the Nicolas Cage.
Or 7 times, because that's
the Nicolas Cage version and the Kirk Cameron versions.
The Nicolas Cage version. I went and saw that in the movie theater, I think. No. We were going to, and then it was only out in the theater for like a week, so we missed it. So we actually had like a big watch party of it because we were like, how did that not get more popular? Like they made a Left Behind with Nicolas Cage.
With Nicolas Cage. I can't believe it's real. But so maybe this week.
Have you seen it?
I've not seen it. No. I've not seen it. No, I've not seen it. So, anyway, that's where we're going next week. Should be fun.
To be clear, don't watch South Park or Left Behind with Nicolas Cage in it.
Or Kirk Cameron.
Matter. Man, we're offending some people.
Probably
They love that.
Oh, sorry. It's not, we still love you, and we probably like things you don't.
It is not the authority on the end times.
No.
But here's our cliffhanger. I bet many people's view of end times is informed more by Left Behind than it is the actual Bible.
I bet so. So we're going to talk about that next week. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.